Believe it or not, I actually have not been the best person at making tough decisions when they were necessary. And when I look back at my journey, I see a lot of time I wasted and a lot of failures that I had to go through that were as a direct result of me avoiding tough decisions that I knew I needed to make. And then vice versa, when I take a look at the success that I was eventually able to experience, it was always on the back of making a heartbreaking and grueling tough decision. So in this video, what I want to do is have a bit of a whiteboard session with you guys and talk about the mental framework and lessons that I've learned making tough decisions in the hopes that I can help you make a necessary tough decision or a hard decision after you watching this, or eventually when you go through it in the future, you can return back to this video and use some of these mental frameworks to guide you. Now, what I've decided to do is look back at my life and think of the three toughest decisions that I actually had to make. One of them being leaving university to pursue business full time. The second one being relationship breakups. Thirdly was restructuring the business, having to let go of loyal staff in order to rebuild the business in the direction that was making the most sense for my future goals. So let's start with the first one. Leaving university. The main lesson that I learned from leaving university was when you make decisions to stay in certain situations that do not align with your future plans. So I was speaking to my mentor at the time, and I was saying to him, I'm going to finish my university and I'm going to get my degree. And he turned to me and he said, well, what are you studying at uni? And I said, I was studying civil engineering. And he said, how long have you been at university? And I said, 2 years. And then he turns around and says, so you're going to spend another 2 to 3 years at uni to get your degree, but you've just told me your plans are to become a successful entrepreneur. How does getting your university degree align whatsoever with your plans to be in business for the remainder of your life? Do you plan on working as an engineer? Do you plan on ever getting a full-time job? And I said, I don't plan on ever getting a full-time job. I don't plan on ever working as an engineer. And you are 100% right. I do want to do business for the rest of my life. I already found what it is that I wanted to do. So what he helped me do was actually show me that me making the decision to stay at university was completely misaligned with my own future plans. And so what I did was I actually dug a little bit deeper and I was thinking about why I never really questioned my decision to stay at university. And it was because of this: people pleasing. I wanted to keep people happy. The main people being my parents, who I love very much, who sacrificed a lot for me. And I know me getting my degree was going to be a very proud moment for them, but also uncles and aunties, and then my family's friends, just so that they wouldn't have to deal with people saying, oh, so your son dropped out of uni, right? Because, well, at least back in the day, that was a big sign of failure. And thankfully, at the time, I had enough courage and enough guidance from my mentor. He actually helped me eventually make the decision to leave university, and I immediately went into business full time. And there is absolutely no way I would be where I am today if I stayed at university for another 3 years. So right off the bat, there are two main points there for you to think about. Number one is what I'm currently doing aligned with my future plans. And number two, how much is people pleasing, wanting to keep people happy, influencing decisions that impact my personal life? The idea should be very simple for you. If the people that you are pleasing, God forbid, were to pass away, and you were to get stuck and left with the decisions that you have made for your own life, how many of those things would you continue to do and be happy that you did? So for example, if you go to university to keep your parents happy and you no longer had your parents around, would you still go to university? Is that something you would do on your own accord? And if the answer is no, then you really shouldn't be there. Now, moving on to my next phase of making tough decisions, and arguably one where I probably struggled the most with, and that was breakups. So relationships, breaking up. I was never really good at pulling the trigger. I'm not a fan of breaking hearts, but looking back, I actually do have a bit of regret with how I handled a lot of previous relationships, only because I know I dragged them out longer than what they should have. And in the process, making things a lot worse. Now, going through breakups is a tough and brutal experience. And it actually is very similar to having to let go of staff, part ways with business partners, even, remove yourself from hanging out with specific friends or stop speaking to certain family members. So this idea of breakups isn't just intimate relationship breakups. It really does cover breakups in general. But when I think of the toughest breakups I've had to happen, they have been more so intimate relationships. And what I learned looking back in hindsight is that the decision that brings the most short-term pain should be the decision that is made. So for example, if I'm in a relationship relationship with someone and I think to myself, should I stay in this relationship or should I end it? Firstly, even asking the question should be enough of an indication of what you need to do. Now, if that's a question that's crossing your mind, the path you should actually take would be the path that is going to cause the most short-term pain, because it's actually very likely that you are making these decisions almost equally weighted. Like you're torn, should I break up? Should I stay with them? Should I break up? Should I see how things go? You're giving equal weight to these because of your fear of that short-term pain. But if that short-term pain was not there and you could make the decision objectively, you'd probably decide to break up right away. If there wasn't going to be heartbreak for another person and then heartbreak for yourself, and you could make that decision without any emotion, it would probably be like 90% breakup and then only 10% stay with them, right? So you have to factor in that the short-term pain that you are experiencing is actually influencing how much weight you're giving to the decision. It may seem like a hard decision, but really it's an obvious one. Your mind's just not seeing it that way. And historically, if you want to look at this objectively speaking, things that tend to have the most short-term pain always end up producing the best long-term benefits. Building a business in the short term is painful, extremely painful, right? But in the long term, once you've built something successful that can run itself and you've gotten to an income level that you dreamt of, it becomes incredibly rewarding and very much well worth it. As opposed to never taking action, wasting your time partying, spending your money, blowing your money, never really taking life seriously, lots of short-term pleasure, but an enormous amount of long-term pain and eventually some terrible long-term results. Now, next, I want to move on to another big decision that I had to make, which was restructuring my business after I had built it to a pretty solid revenue mark and then letting go of staff members that were loyal to me as a result. Now, this was a really hard thing for me to do, but I actually used a lot of the points above. Number one, staying in my current business structure at the time was not aligning with my future plans. Number two, keeping my staff members employed was me wanting to please them so I don't have to break their hearts because I know they wanted to keep working for me. And finally, it was going to bring the most short-term pain for me. So I knew it was a decision that I had to make. Now, one question that I asked myself that really, really helped me gain objective perspective on whether I should make this decision or not, which also helps when it comes to breakups, is the question, if I was to do this again, would I choose these conditions? So if I had the option to do this again, I click a button, I reset, would I rebuild my business and hire these people and pay them these wages and have them in these positions if I had the option to do it all over again? If I could click the reset button, would I get back into the relationship that I'm currently in, or would I try to avoid it and actually save myself for someone else? Now, at the time when I was torn about what I should do, I asked myself this question and I immediately knew what I had to do, because when I asked myself what I would do if I could hit the reset button, it became very clear to me that I wouldn't have hired the current team that I had. There's nothing wrong with them as individuals, but I had no need for this position, for this person in this position. I didn't need that many staff members. I was way over resourced, paying way too much. My overheads were ridiculous. I would have just done X, Y, Z. That's what I told myself. If I could reset, I would just hire one person who would do all of this. I would get rid of all these services that we're offering, and I would just really niche and narrow down. And that's what I did. And boy, was it a painful experience, extremely difficult to do. But now I'm reaping the rewards of that decision. And finally, one more thing that I've done, which I think will really help you guys out, is ask yourself, what would the 80-year-old version of you advise you to do? Because when you think that way, you start to see things from a much bigger, time horizon. And typically when we start to make decisions with larger time frames, we actually make better decisions. So what should I do in my business today? What should I focus on in the next 6 months? If it's about making the most money in the next 6 months, as opposed to setting yourself up to be an 8-figure business in 5 years, that second way of making decisions will actually be much better for you in the long term. And so when you ask yourself questions like, what would the 80-year-old version of me advise me to do with regard to the current relationship that I'm in? Well, I probably say, make the decision, make sure that whoever you decide to spend the rest of your life with is someone you are 100% certain is your soulmate. And a relationship you don't constantly have issues in, because if you have issues today and these issues don't show any signs of fixing themselves, you're just going to be signing yourself up for 50 to 60 years of pain if it even lasts that long. Okay, so that's another mental frame that I've used. So I really do hope that going through this has been helpful for you guys. And I know that making tough decisions is brutal. There are tough decisions I need to make all the time. And with all this said, sometimes I might take a bit longer than I need to make these tough decisions. But I will leave you with this one final point. And this final point is the idea of power. Now, when we think about almighty power, the first thing that comes to my mind is God. And what makes God so powerful? Well, he can just say something and it is. He can just think something and it is, right? Creates the world, creates the universe, creates us. He just thought it and it just became reality. Now, what that tells me is that the time between us thinking we need to do something and actually doing it is a direct reflection on how powerful we are as individuals and how powerful we are in life in general. And so if you want to become more powerful as an individual, you need to shorten the time frame between when you realize you need to make a tough decision and when you actually make it. Hope you guys enjoyed that. See you in the next video.